My name is Sheila Corona. Welcome to Sassy Seer Sheila and New Light Streaming Love, as this will be seen on both channels. This is Invisible Hands by Jason Gray. Originally written June 9th, 2026. There are moments in a person's life that become permanent residents of their memory, no matter how many years pass and no matter how much life unfolds afterward. They remain untouched by time. They wait quietly in the background until something triggers them, and suddenly, there you are, there again. Not just remembering them, but reliving them like they just happened yesterday. More than 20 years have passed since the last time I saw my father alive, and I can still see and hear every single detail of that night. I can see the hallway. I can still hear his voice. I can still see the smile on his face as he looked at his grandson. Most of all, I can still feel the invisible hands that touched me. It was Halloween night, October 31st, 2004. At the time, it seemed like an ordinary evening. My eldest son, Jaden, was 4 years old and excited in a way only a 4-year-old can be on Halloween. His costume was on, his candy bag was ready, and we decided to stop by to show Grandpa before heading out. Looking back now, I realize life often disguises its most important moments as ordinary ones. If someone had told me that night that I was walking into the last conversation I would ever have with my father, I would have sat down beside him and never left. I would have listened longer. I would have talked longer. I would have said everything I needed to say, but life does not grant us that luxury. It rarely announces its endings. It simply lets us live them, and only later do we realize what they were. Things were finally beginning to improve for me. 7 months earlier, on March 14th, 2004, I had walked into my very first AA meeting. I was 29 years old and had finally reached a point where there were only two choices left: live or die. The very bottom. My addiction had stripped away absolutely everything, including my very soul. Looking back now, I can finally trace the road all the way back to a school park in Saskatoon when I was 11 years old. That was where I took my first drink and set the wheels in motion. People who have never struggled with addiction often imagine it begins dramatically, but sometimes it begins quietly, almost invisibly. A drink in a park, a feeling of ease, a sense of escape. Then years pass. Next, decades pass. And before you know it, the thing that you thought you controlled has become the very thing. This is controlling every single aspect of you. That first drink never ended until I was 29 years old, except for one brief year between the ages of 18 and 19. 17 years completely disappeared inside alcohol, drugs, denial, and self-destruction. And by the grace of something greater than myself, I finally found my way into recovery. By Halloween of 2004, I was 7 months clean and sober, 7 months may not sound like much to some people, but for me, it was a miracle. I still vividly remember my first days and weeks being completely clean and sober. My relationship with my father had always been complicated. As a child, he was my hero. I do not mean that casually. He was truly my hero. He was larger than life to me. He was the man who could fix anything, solve anything, and overcome anything. And then, at age 32, his health began to fail. I was 8 years old. At the time, I did not understand what was happening, as children rarely do. I did not understand grief. I did not understand fear, and I did not understand watching someone you love become vulnerable. What I felt instead was anger. Over the years, that anger hardened into resentment, and eventually I convinced myself that I hated him. It took me decades to realize that I never hated my father. I hated watching him become sick. I hated watching my hero become human. I hated the fact that life was taking pieces of him away before I was ready to let them go. Those feelings became walls between us, and my addiction eventually built even higher walls on top of them. In the spring of 2004, something in my life had changed in an instant. Sobriety was now very slowly starting to rebuild what addiction had destroyed. My father and I began talking again. Men of our generation often struggle with any type of emotional conversations. We definitely were no exception, but we were talking once again. We were beginning to rebuild our relationship. There was a bridge forming between us again, one conversation at a time. He knew something had changed in me. I did not tell him much about AA. I did not talk about the meetings, the book that saved my life, the steps, or my first sponsors, but he could see something. Parents always know more than we think they do. He could see that his son was finally coming back. That night, sitting in his apartment, I remember how his face lit up when Jaden walked into the room. My father loved being a grandfather. There was something about it that transformed him. The illness disappeared for a while. The pain disappeared. The years disappeared. He looked at Jaden with a kind of pure joy that is difficult to describe. Even now, all these years later, I can still see his eyes. We sat there and talked about life, about school, and about what I was doing. I had recently turned 30 and gone back to school. For the first time in years, I was making plans instead of excuses, and I was trying my hardest to build something instead of destroying it. Secretly, I had already decided that when I got my 1-year medallion in AA, I was going to invite my father to my cake night. I already had my 3-month and 6-month medallions, but 1 year felt different. 1 year felt real. 1 year felt like proof. I wanted him there. I wanted him to see that I was serious. I wanted him to know that this was not yet another false start. And most of all, I wanted him to be proud of me. Eventually, that evening, it was time to leave. Jaden hugged his grandfather, and my father hugged him back. Then he told him how much he loved him. I can still hear the exact tone of his voice. It is strange how grief preserves certain sounds. Out of all the conversations we ever had, that moment remains crystal clear. As we started toward the door, a thought entered my mind with unusual force. Quote, tell him you love him. It absolutely was not a casual thought. It was not something I generated myself. It arrived suddenly and almost urgently. Quote, tell him you love him. I ignored it. One word that immediately comes to mind as I write this: pride. We walked into the hallway. Tell him. The feeling grew stronger. Go back and tell him. I kept walking. The hallway stretched ahead toward the elevator, and with every step, the feeling intensified. I have spent 22 years trying to explain what happened next, and the only way I know how is to say that it felt like invisible hands were pushing me backward. Physically pushing me backward. I could feel them pressing on my chest. Something was urging me to turn around. Something was pulling me backward toward that apartment door. Something was trying desperately to make me go back and say those three words. Quote, tell him. Go back. Tell him now. The pressure became overwhelming. I kept walking. The invisible hands pushed harder. I resisted. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and the doors closed. Instantly, the feeling disappeared. 16 days later, on November 15th, 2004, the phone rang early in the morning. My mother was on the line. My parents had already been divorced for years, but I knew immediately something was wrong. She told me I needed to get to the hospital right away. I drove there as fast as I could. My mother was already there. My father's girlfriend was already there. The moment I arrived, I was escorted to the family room. Anyone who has ever been taken to a hospital family room knows that feeling. Those rooms exist for the moments nobody wants. Next, the doctors came in and told us they had done everything they could. They fought for him. They tried to save him. My father had died. He was 53 years old. I do not remember much immediately afterward. Shock is a strange thing. It wraps itself around you like a blanket and dulls the edges of reality. Eventually, everyone else went in to say their goodbyes, and then I went in alone. There he was, laying on a cold steel table, my father, lifeless, the man who had once seemed larger than life, the man who gave me life, the man who taught me how to ride my bike, the man who frustrated me, the man who inspired me, the man who disappointed me, the man I had spent years finding my way back to, and the man who I loved with every fiber of my being. Standing there beside him, the words finally came. The words I could not say 16 days earlier. The words those invisible hands had begged me to speak. Through tears and sobs, I finally said them. I love you, Dad. I said them over and over. I love you. I love you. I love you. This time he could not answer. My father's funeral was held at Chapel Lawn in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where he is now laid to rest with my younger brother, Derek. To be honest, I did not expect many people to come. Grief has a way of convincing you that you are alone. We sat in the family room waiting for the service to begin. Eventually, someone came in and told us it was time. We stood up and walked into the chapel. I remember stopping in my tracks. The room was almost full. Everywhere I looked, there were familiar faces, old friends of mine, family I had never met, people I knew, and then all the people from AA who never even knew my father. These were the people who had watched me crawl out of addiction, people who had helped carry me when I could not carry myself. As I was standing there, looking out across that room, I suddenly understood something that has only become clearer with time. I did not get sober in March of 2004 by accident. Had my father died 8 months earlier, I probably would not have attended his funeral. And that is a painful truth, but it is the truth. I was that lost. I was that far gone. Addiction had taken me that far away from myself. Instead, I stood there, sober, present, able to grieve, able to remember, able to give my father's eulogy, able to tell the story of his life in front of that room full of people and remain composed. Recovery did not just save me. It gave me the ability to show up for one of the most important moments of my life. 22 years later, I still think about those invisible hands. I do not know what they were. Maybe they were intuition. Maybe they were God. Maybe they were love itself. Maybe they were simply the deepest part of me, recognizing what my conscious mind could not yet see. All I know is that they were trying to tell me something. They knew something that I did not know. They knew time was running out. If there is a lesson in this story, it is not about death. It is not about grief, and it is not even about regret. It is about now. Somewhere in your life, there is probably someone you love who needs to hear something from you. A thank you, an apology, a hug, 3 simple words. I love you. We always assume there will be another visit, another phone call, another holiday, another chance. Sometimes there is not. If I could walk back down that hallway just one more time, I know exactly what I would do. I would listen to the invisible hands. Jason Gray. I have to say that Jason actually sent this to me day before yesterday, I think it was, and asked me to record it. And this is another proof to me. My consciousness was not ready to record this until today. We don't know what we don't know. Thank you, Jason. And I have to also thank my larger self. I would not have been ready for this. I'm ready now until we meet again.